News 24/7. I'm Juliette Goodrich. You've been watching a special report on the stock market taking a major hit a day after President Trump's sweeping tariff announcement. New tariffs on foreign cars took effect today. So in Michigan, a Detroit suburb home to several major auto plants, they're bracing for impact right now. We're talking about Sterling Heights, where you'll find auto plants for both Ford and Stellantis. Those companies own brands like Ford, Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Maserati, and more. Michael Taylor, the mayor of Sterling Heights, joining us live now. Michael, thanks for joining us again. We spoke to you yesterday before the president's announcement. Now we've heard about the tariffs. What is your reaction today?
Well, it's been awful. I mean, you can see the stock market is reacting, investors are reacting, and people are scared. I've even talked to a couple of Trump supporters who are, wondering if this has gone too far. So it's been very bad so far, and I'm afraid we haven't even felt the worst of it.
Yeah, we're seeing reactions from both Ford and Stellantis right now following Trump's tariff rollout. What are you learning, and what do you make of it?
Well, we're learning little by little. So we heard today that the Sterling stamping plant that's run by Stellantis in Sterling Heights is going to be temporarily laying people off. We're hoping it's very temporary, but we're sort of in the dark. We've had very little communication. I've had no communication from the White House, which is rare. Previous administrations have collaborated a lot more closely, including Trump in his first term. So we don't know exactly how this is all going to shake out, and I think businesses are sort of waiting on the sidelines, trying to figure that out too.
So the president brought a retired auto worker from Michigan up on stage yesterday. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Thank you, Mr. President. I grew up just north of Detroit, Michigan, in Macomb County, known as the home of the Reagan Democrats. My first vote for president was for Ronald Reagan. I thought that was going to be the best president I ever saw in my lifetime until Donald J. Trump came along. I have watched my entire life, I have watched plant after plant after plant in Detroit and in the metro Detroit area close. There are now plants sitting idle. There are now plants that are underutilized, and Donald Trump's policies are going to bring product back into those underutilized plants. There's going to be new investment. There's going to be new plants built. And the UAW members, and I brought 20 of them with me, they're sitting right over here. We support Donald Trump's policies on tariffs 100%. So, Mr. President, we can't thank you enough. And in 6 months or a year, we're going to begin to see the benefits. I can't wait to see what's happening 3 or 4 years down the road. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, these are comments from a retired auto worker from Michigan. So, Michael, what is your reaction to those comments?
Well, listen, I like Brian Pannebecker. I know him. I've met him several times, and he certainly has found a supporter in Donald Trump. I think he's wrong. I think that these tariffs have gone way too far, that they're not going to be bringing workers back to Michigan and to Macomb County, that the opposite is going to be true. I think we're going to see higher prices for automobiles. We're going to see more pressure put on residents who live in cities like Sterling Heights, which is a blue-collar town. We're not a wealthy suburb by any stretch of the imagination. So those workers and those people are going to be squeezed by these tariffs, and any benefits, I think, is just speculative and wishful thinking. It would take years and years to see those. So I like Brian. I respect him, but I disagree with him on this one.
All right, Michael Taylor, mayor of Sterling Heights. Appreciate your time again.
Thank you.
Well, CBS News is tracking the impact of Trump's new tariffs in real time. So taking a look at where we stand as the new auto tariffs kick in. So this graph shows the already rising cost of new cars in recent years. A small SUV that cost $30,000 in 2020 set you back more than $36,000 last month. Similarly, a used car that cost $20,000 in 2020 jumped to $27,000. And when it comes to groceries, the price tracker shows the changing cost of things like apple juice, avocados, bananas, bell peppers, and blueberries. All these goods mostly imported from Canada, Mexico, China, and other countries. As Trump's tariffs take effect, you can track the changes in price for your go-to items at cbsnews.com/tariffs. We want to get to some breaking news now. The Pentagon's acting inspecting general will review Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's use of the Signal app to send messages about a military strike. The review will also look at other defense officials that use the app, which is not part of DoD's secure communications network. The goal is to see whether these officials complied with Defense Department policies. The review was launched after a bipartisan request by the Senate Armed Services Committee. A high-stakes hearing happening right now over the Trump administration's deportation flights. What could come down today? That's next. Plus, communities cleaning up after dangerous storms roll through parts of the U.S. We're tracking where the storm is heading next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Federal District Court Judge Boasberg just ended a hearing to determine whether the Justice Department violated his order pausing removals under the Alien Enemies Act. This comes after hundreds of Venezuelan men were deported to a Salvadorian prison last month. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland was in the courthouse at the time. So, Scott, what happened in the hearing?
This has become a whole new thing. This now transcends the deportation of a couple hundred Venezuelan nationals. This is now an issue of separation of powers, and you could feel it resonating off the marble walls at the courthouse today. The chief judge here in Washington, James Boasberg, was pressing an attorney from the Department of Justice about why those planes weren't turned around on the night of March 15th, as was ordered by the judge. Those planes continued to El Salvador. The Venezuelan nationals have been locked up in El Salvador since, but he's trying to get the timeline here. If he asked the planes to be turned around, if he ordered it to happen, why didn't it happen? There weren't a whole lot of crystal declarative answers from the Department of Justice today. So here's what the judge is going to do. He's going to issue an order, likely next week, as to what comes next. Potentially contempt of court hearings against some people, some officials inside the Department of Justice. That is quite a provocative thing. And it's also a thing that could impact so many other legal challenges against the Trump administration. Do they adhere to court orders, or do they defy them? There is a stability of democracy that's at stake when you ask that question.
All right, Scott McFarland. Scott, thank you. Appreciate that. Another case we're also following, a Tufts University student detained by ICE after being accused of supporting Hamas, but she hasn't been charged with anything. Ramesa Ozturk's detention by agents in plain clothes in an unmarked vehicle sparked controversy. Massachusetts District Court heard arguments on this case earlier this afternoon. Let's go to our breaking news correspondent, Chanel Call, in the CBS newsroom in New York. So, Chanel, what are your key takeaways from this hearing?
Well, Jules, good to see you. So the back and forth inside that federal court in Boston today was really centered on where this case should be heard. The DOJ essentially saying that should happen in Louisiana. That's where Ramesa Ozturk is currently being held. But her lawyers today argue the case should instead be moved to Massachusetts, where she was living and where the case was filed. U.S. District Judge Denise Casper did not make a decision on this today. But you mentioned this. Many of our viewers will also remember Ozturk was detained on her way to a Ramadan iftar dinner last week, and there was a surveillance video that showed 6 plainclothes ICE agents who appeared to be wearing masks. They stopped her on the street and then took her into custody. This is someone, again, who is a Turkish doctoral student and a Fulbright scholar. She was here in the U.S., living here with a student visa. That visa, we know, has now been revoked.
Chanel, question for you. How is Tufts reacting to the detention?
Right. Well, so Ozturk co-wrote an op-ed calling on Tufts University to essentially divest from Israel and acknowledge that the campaign in Gaza is a genocide. DHS claims she engaged in activities that support Hamas. Now, just yesterday, we heard from Tufts President Sunil Kumar submitting a declaration in that defending Ozturk and supporting her motion regarding her release and return to Massachusetts. Kumar said the university is, quote, no information to support the allegations that she was engaged in activities at Tufts that warrant her arrest and detention. Again, this case is still ongoing, and it appears the judge has not today made a decision on where the case will proceed.
Chanel Call. Chanel, thank you. All right, we're tracking severe weather hitting parts of the Midwest and southern U.S. So check this out. This is video of a possible tornado. It was spotted in Lake City, Arkansas yesterday. The violent storms have killed at least 7 people so far. And we're getting a look at the aftermath. This is the scene in Kentucky, Illinois, and Missouri, where communities are busy cleaning up. You can see roofs just ripped out of large buildings, homes and businesses damaged. In Michigan, people living in the Detroit area woke up to a flooded mess, the storm slamming the area with heavy rain. And there was also much water that overwhelmed the drainage system, flooding streets and neighborhoods. And we take you to Tennessee. New video into our monitor. It shows several strike teams. They're searching through the wreckage of a home after it took a direct hit from a tornado. So take a look at this. You can see just piles of debris. Now, this is in the city of Selmar. It is outside of Memphis. All of this video coming in real time right now. But let's go to Darren Peck, our meteorologist in the studio right now, to talk about the conditions and where things stand in the next hours or so.
Here's the challenge with what's happening right now. Normally, when we cover storms like this, it's in one part of the country one day, and then the next day it has moved onward and it's affecting another part of the country. That's not going to happen here. So we need to kind of shift our focus on thinking about this. It's not so much the severe weather now that we're concerned about. It's the amount of rain that is about to fall over the same location. Here's a little perspective. First thing I want you to see is what's happened over the last 24 hours. This was the severe weather outbreak. And that's what Juliet was showing you so many pictures of. Look at the part of the country where that happened. Because what we're going to do is switch our time frame now. And instead of looking back at the last 24 hours, I want you to see what happens over the next 3 days. We're going to look forecast imagery on here that takes us from now through Saturday. Look at the same parts of the country. That was today. Here comes tomorrow. Same area. And then we start to get into Saturday, and that's when you get even more. This is a problem now from a rainfall standpoint, particularly right through here. Flooding becomes the major concern. Yesterday's storms put down like 3 to 4 inches of rain. Between now and Saturday, when we get to this point, there's an additional foot. Think about that for a second. That means some of these places, like through Arkansas, are going to see 15 inches of rain in total. This is a stationary boundary. This is where you get into trouble. Just a little overview on what's going on here. Normally, the temperature profile in the atmosphere shows you where the cold front boundary is, where you're going to get the worst of the weather. It happens where warm air meets cold air. Did you see what happened here? We're taking a look ahead to the next 3 days. And again, that boundary hasn't moved. That's why this is such a problem. And when you take a look at it even down lower, down towards the surface, you can see all this warm air just continuing to surge out of the Gulf and create that boundary. So, Juliet, the focus on this, intense rainfall from now through Saturday.
All right, Darren, thank you. One day after a federal judge dismissed corruption charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams, the mayor announcing he'll run for re-election. But he won't run as a Democrat. On X this morning, Adams says he'll run as an independent, saying there isn't a liberal or conservative way to fix New York. A woman is dead and a man is hurt after a house exploded in Southgate near Detroit. Several homes were impacted by this explosion, including one that was a total loss. Crews are working to clean up the streets, which are littered with debris after the explosion. The cause of the explosion has not been determined, but officials are investigating it as a gas explosion. So we want to take a look at how tariffs are impacting communities around the country. We begin in Florida with reporter Miguel Octavio from our affiliate in Tampa, who spoke to an auto shop owner in St. Petersburg. Take a listen.
Rahala says he sees the pros and the cons of the tariffs.
And if it gives more American companies more money, profit, their workers, employees, I think that could be a good thing.
The president says the steps are needed to raise revenue and promote business here. But success doesn't happen overnight.
More money it costs us to do business, the more we have to charge.
He says people looking to buy or need repairs, especially those making less, may feel the brunt.
Unfortunately, that's the people that are going to probably feel it the most, because they're not going to have the option of getting something that's really, really inexpensive. With the tariffs put on them, those are going to go up.
Rahala says a number of his parts come from all over.
Thailand, Vietnam, anywhere.
Regardless of what happens, he'll adapt as needed, like he has the last 30-plus years.
All right, let's move to the Northeast. CBS News Philadelphia anchor and reporter Aziza Shuler spoke to a pharmacist in New Jersey about the impact of tariffs on prescription drugs, many of which are imported.
Large drug distributors may pass those price hikes on to pharmacies, especially for medications from countries like Switzerland, which is subject to a 31% reciprocal tariff. Pharmacist Kai Hewen says small independent pharmacies like his in Pennsauken will struggle to afford many brand name and generic prescriptions.
At the end of the day, you still get the medication, but I just feel bad myself or the independent. They're the one that's squeezing out. Losing out because the consumer is still going to pay the same price regardless.
Certainly some uncertainty in the market, uncertainty in the business community, and eventually, if businesses they don't want to take the hit on this. They don't want this to impact their profit margins.
In the Mountain West, CBS News Colorado reporter Sarah Horbakowicz spoke to the executive director of the Boulder County Farmers Market about how tariffs are impacting farmers and shoppers.
The tariffs could impact costs and access to out-of-season produce, avocados year-round, and a long list of other groceries. But it could also put a stronger focus on Colorado-made.
The Chev is made in Buena Vista, Colorado.
That cheese comes from one of nearly 200 local food providers that Mackenzie Selk works with through the Boulder Farmers Market, expecting more local customers if foreign food costs rise.
We're growing all that we can, and farmers are doing their best to be flexible and available for that local influx.
But local costs could also be affected as tariff impact stays up in the air.
Uncertainty about what the long-term impact of tariffs will do on fuel, on machinery, on things like jars for canning peaches or applesauce.
All right, now we take you to the West Coast. CBS News Bay Area reporter Kara St. Cyr spoke to the owner of a winery in Oakland who say tariffs will hurt their bottom line.
You walk into a fine wine store, 50% of that shop is going to be imported wines and spirits. And the rest is going to be mix of domestic wines and other countries. So, you don't just suddenly fill those shelves with just domestic made products. It just doesn't work that way.
Adding to that, Chris doesn't understand how these tariffs will be applied. In the past, tariffs were added based on the volume of the imported wine. The new tariffs are based on value. Chris says it's harder to anticipate the cost.
I have a boat on the water with a 40-foot container that's got 1,200 cases of wine on it. So, I don't know what's going to happen.
A new bidder throws their name into buying TikTok. But could a deal be reached before a ban goes in effect? Stay with us. You're watching CBS News 24/7. Deeper into big tech. Companies like Apple and Amazon sank after Trump's tariff rollout. Questions swarming over whether everything from iPhones to the items in your Amazon cart could become more expensive under the new tariffs. So let's bring in tech journalist Yasmin Khorram to break it all down for us, the concerns and what we're all seeing today.
Yes, Juliet, tech stocks are getting hit the worst today. Feeling the biggest pain is Apple. That's because 90% of its iPhones come from China. Now, interestingly, in the past few years, due to China tensions, Apple has moved some of that production out of China into places like Vietnam and India. Of course, we saw yesterday that almost no country spared from President Trump's tariffs. If we have to guess anything, either Apple is going to swallow the additional taxes or they're going to trickle down to the consumer. Knowing how these tech companies work, my guess is that these iPhones will be a lot more expensive in the future.
Things will go up. Okay, Let's talk about Amazon. Is it feeling the pressure?
Amazon is also feeling the pressure. We can see it is down almost 9% today. That's because most of the products that Amazon sells, a lot of them come from China. So if you check your cart today, chances are a lot of those Chinese-based products have gone up a couple dollars. I checked mine this morning. Couple items gone up $5 to $10. So anything tech related, we will really feel the impact today.
All right, and speaking of Amazon, they've also jumped into the bidding war with TikTok. So what's going on with that?
Yes, last time we spoke, there was about 3 chief bidders. Now there's so many more.
Right.
Amazon notably has thrown their hat in the ring. They wrote a personal letter to JD Vance and Howard Lutnick showing their interest. Also, this company called AppLovin, they are Palo Alto based. They collect data from users and tailor ads based on those that data that they collect. It's anyone's guess right now who is going to buy TikTok, if anybody. We are nowhere closer today than we were earlier this week. 170 million users up for grabs. This is a lot at stake. It could be anyone's game.
Does a letter work, or is it money?
Both. It's really Trump and ByteDance.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Yasmin, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, we're watching Wall Street as the world reacts to President Trump's tariff announcement. So let's take a look at our interactive stock market heat map. This is brought to you by FinViz. Okay, it's in red, showing the top 500 stocks right here. Joining us now is Yoni Jacobs, a product manager at FinViz. Yoni has 15 years of experience in public markets as an investment analyst, portfolio manager, strategist, has worked at Merrill Lynch and Bank of America. I'm sure there's more to your resume, but just getting the word out that you know your stuff here. So tell us, how does this FinViz map work?
Hi, Jules. Thanks for having me. Great to be here. So at FinViz, we build investing tools like charts and stock screeners to find new investment opportunities and news headlines. But one of our most popular tools is the stock market heat map, which you show every day, which is really great. And the heat map shows the largest 500 companies in the S&P. So I'll pull that up for you.
Okay.
And it shows the top 500 largest companies in the U.S. based on the S&P 500. And as you mentioned every day, green is up, red is down, and the size of the box is proportional to the size of the company or the market cap. So you'll notice some of the very well-known companies that most people know, like Apple and Amazon and Google and Tesla and Nvidia. Those are large for a reason, because they are some of the biggest companies in the stock market, right?
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Additionally, the stocks are grouped by sector and industry, so you can quickly gauge what parts of the market are doing better than others.
Yeah, if you walk us through today, what did markets look like this morning, and then what happened at the close?
Well, today we woke up to a sea of red in the morning. We ended up terribly as well, a big down day for the stock market, following the announcement of broad and sweeping tariffs by President Trump. Of course, we've had plenty of warnings and red flags leading up to this, with trade wars and overvaluations and underperformance by those mega cap technology companies, threats of inflation. So plenty of risks out there. And we still don't know what the impact of the tariffs will be in the long run, whether they'll be positive, or like the stock market is telling us today that this will probably be a negative and potentially even trigger a global economic slowdown. That's kind of the fear of the day. But what we could do is we could look at the stock market heat map on FinViz. And when we think about the stock market, it's not just about the overall stock market index like the S&P 500 or the Dow. But if we want to get better insights on the stock market, we have to look at the underlying components or the companies that make up the stock market. So that's what's great about this heat map, is not only do you know that a lot of stocks are down with all this red, but you can see which parts of the market are doing well, right? So we see that there's a bunch of mega cap technology underperforming. But what we do see is there are sectors in the economy that are actually went up today. So historically, the sectors that do well during a recession or economic slowdown are consumer defensive, for example. So you see Coke and Pepsi were up today. Procter & Gamble was up today. So consumer defensive or consumer staples is a great place to be. Additionally, utilities is historically a good place to be during a recession. And finally, healthcare held up a little bit better today than other parts of the market.
You must dream in FinViz maps, I tell you. There's so much intricacies to it all. But let's talk about tariffs, specifically on Vietnam and how they're affecting brands like Nike.
Well, the tariffs on the imports from Vietnam are a big threat to Nike and other sportswear brands. Half of Nike's footwear is actually made in Vietnam. Adidas is about 40%. Lululemon and Columbia Sportswear big portion as well. And On Cloud, the On premium sneakers that everyone loves, those are almost 90% of their footwear is made in Vietnam. So many sportswear brands rely heavily on China and Vietnam for their manufacturing. And unfortunately, with Nike already struggling, sales are declining. Higher cost is definitely not a good thing. So we'll see if this added cost is passed along to the consumer. That's really the big fear, that we'll start seeing inflation or prices being passed on to the consumer. Or maybe on the positive side for Vietnam, maybe Vietnam and others can get on President Trump's good side and find a way to reduce or offset those tariffs. But I think as of right now, there's a ton of uncertainty. Nobody truly knows what's going to happen, but it doesn't really look great.
We do know that you're the expert, and we appreciate your information, though, Yoni. So much help there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules.
All right, let's get back to that breaking news. The Defense Department Inspector General will look into whether Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's use of Signal complied with Defense Department policies. So let's get to CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. What do we know about the Inspector General and evaluating Hegseth's use of this signal?
Well, Juliet, it's going to start by drilling down into what happened, right? Who was involved and whether those individuals broke the House rules here at the DOD. It's a one-page memo. It's brief, intentionally brief, and probably vague, only serving as a notification that the Inspector General will be conducting what he calls an evaluation, and it is in direct response to the letter he received by the Senate Armed Services Committee requesting an inquiry. So it really breaks down to two objectives, and that's why it's important that these two are outlined. First, to determine what extent the Secretary of Defense and other DOD personnel complied or maybe did not comply with the strict DOD rules and procedures using commercial apps like Signal to conduct official business. The second objective is to review whether that was in compliance with classification. So whether the information that was shared in that Signal conversation was classified, and also whether that adheres to policy attaining to records and retention requirements. So conversations that take place at this sort of level need to be officially recorded. So they'll be looking into that as well. So for starters, the evaluation will focus obviously here at the Pentagon, at the Office of the Secretary of Defense, to a wider extent at Washington, D.C. It's going to include U.S. Central Command, which is actually based in Florida, in Tampa, Florida. That's where CENTCOM is headquartered. Because considering that the conversation had to do with Houthi airstrikes that were underway, and Yemen is inside that CENTCOM area of responsibility. So this is just sort of the opening salvo. Two individuals have to be put forward, it's requesting, and it's basically to put them on notification that this investigation, I'm going to rephrase that, this evaluation is underway.
Evaluation. Okay, got that. All right, Charlie D'Agata. Charlie, thank you. All right, you could have a harder time getting through airport security. The new changes in what travelers need to know next. Let's bring up our new TikTok tube as Canadian businesses prepare for the economic hit of President Trump's tariffs. CBS News' Lana Zach takes us to a Honda dealership in Windsor, Canada, where anger over the trade war is visible.
Take a look at this. Elbows up. That is a hockey reference and basically means they're not going to take it lying down. Here at this Honda dealership in Windsor, Canada, all of the stickers on the cars, Ontario built, Canadian driven, the entire showroom really awash in signs like this one, built by proud Canadians for proud Canadians. Hundreds of maple leaves all around, and the owner of this Honda dealership tells me that he's doing gangbuster sales. People are coming by saying they want to trade in their vehicle for one that was built in Canada. But in the long term, he is concerned about the economic impacts that an ongoing trade war can have, and he's trying to do his part. He's a big Detroit Lions fan, but he says that as long as this trade war is ongoing, he is not going to visit the United States.
And our social team has so much great content like this on our TikTok and Instagram pages, so follow us at the handle CBS News. You might want to check your driver's license. In less than a month, you'll need a real ID to get through airport security, and millions of Americans still don't have it. CBS News' New York's Tony Aiello has more.
Just about a month to the Real ID deadline, and there is a big push to make sure travelers know how it will impact them. The roots of Real ID go back 20 years. It was a 2005 recommendation from the 9/11 Commission to strengthen security at airports and federal facilities. State DMVs started issuing them in 2007. So millions of us have the Real ID, but many do not, and now they're up against the May 7 deadline. If you don't have a Real ID, then to board a plane or enter certain federal facilities after May 7, you'll have to show a passport or other acceptable ID, such as a global entry card. The concern is that thousands of people show up at airports with non-compliant IDs and no alternate ID, creating chaos and delays. The Transportation Security Administration says it will have more guidance next week for people who are ticketed but don't have acceptable ID. In the meantime, state DMVs report a rush of people trying to upgrade to the Real ID. This involves making an appointment, an in-person visit with birth certificate, proof of name change, multiple other documents that may be required. Every state DMV has a website that can walk you through this process, but good luck finding an appointment because in many states, the appointments are at a premium. If you're having trouble booking an appointment with DMV, check your local AAA office. Many of them provide DMV services and can help with Real ID. I'm at LaGuardia Airport. Tony Aiello, back to you.
It appears that Trump's sweeping tariffs is not only impacting people, but penguins too. We'll explain next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. President Trump's worldwide tariff sent global markets reeling today, and political and business leaders scrambling to decide their next moves. CBS's Remi Inocencio reports from London now.
Headlines hammered home the reality of President Trump's sweeping global trade tariffs.
For Australia, these tariffs are not unexpected, but let me be clear, they are totally unwarranted.
Stock markets in Beijing and Tokyo sank to multi-month lows, and leaders lined up to condemn President Trump's actions, promising countermeasures of their own. The French Prime Minister called the trade tariffs a catastrophe. Here in the UK, there is a slight sigh of relief as the nation was hit by the lowest levy of 10%. But the Prime Minister says that he will push for what is best for his country.
Nobody wins in a trade war. That is not in our national interest. We have a fair and balanced trade relationship with the US, and we will fight for the best deal for Britain.
Trump slapped 20% tariffs on the European Union, a move the European Commission chief called a major blow to the world economy.
All businesses, big and small, will suffer from day one. From greater uncertainty to the disruption of supply chains.
Dozens of countries have been hit with higher rates than Europe. Vietnam is facing a 46% tariff. This Samsung employee predicts it will lead to lower profits and higher living costs. One thing is clear. President Trump's tariffs have upended the post-war global trade order, with countries only just now starting to navigate the aftermath. Remi Inocencio, CBS News, London.
On this icy island, the biggest consumers you'll see are king penguins and elephant seals eating fish. You won't find any human shoppers on the uninhabited Heard Island, but it is still being targeted by President Trump's tariffs. Heard, along with McDonald Islands, are also our Australian territories in the Arctic. They are both considered one of the more remote locations on Earth. To get there, you need to travel 2 weeks by boat from Perth, Australia. And that's not all. These other Australian external territories are also being targeted on the same list as China, India, and the EU. Norfolk Island is home to 2,000 people, about 600 miles off eastern Australia, but it was actually hit with some of the highest duties at almost 30%. That's much steeper than the 10% tariffs on mainland Australia, and the Prime Minister there said he's not sure why.
Norfolk Island, interestingly, is I think 29%. I'm not sure what Norfolk Island major exports are to to the United States and why it's been singled out, but it has.
America Decides with Major Garrett is next. A new documentary gives an inside look at El Salvador's mega prison for gang members. We'll speak to the man behind this documentary coming up. You're watching CBS News 24/7.